relaunch, what can you tell us about what the city will be able to do as far as opening things up?
Well, what's critical in the announcement today, it's not particularly surprising because we'd always said stage 2 sometime around the 15th of June. The 19th was the date we were thinking of. They pulled it up a week based on numbers, which is fine. But the big difference is they've included gyms and rec centers. So the city's been working for some time to figure out, can we actually reopen our rec centers safely? It certainly won't be Friday. We haven't hired staff, we laid a bunch of people off. So getting back up there is what we're working on right now. The other thing is that stage 2 always included libraries. And the Calgary Public Library has been working on their relaunch plan. They shared details on that last week of a slow ramp up back to library services. There were a couple of new, and we had heard the rumor that gyms were going to be moved into stage 2. There were a couple of new things here in terms of indoor and outdoor gathering caps. No caps on places of worship giving services as long as people are 2 meters distanced and there's no singing. It's an interesting one. So we're still analyzing what those things will mean for the city, but ultimately we suspected that recreation facilities would be coming up, and we've got ourselves ready for that conversation. And I should have more to say about that towards the end of the week in terms of what the City of Calgary Rec Center's schedule will be, but it certainly won't be Friday.
Is something possible by the end of June, perhaps?
I think so. I think so.
What?
And you know, I shouldn't say it certainly won't be Friday. There may be something very limited happening that early, but to get to that ramp up will take a bit more time.
Does this mean anything for the city's state of local emergency?
Yeah, we're going to be discussing that today. Right now, the only order it stands under the city's state of local emergency is one around outdoor activities and sports. And it looks like much of that will be superseded by what is happening in stage 2. So likely we're not going to need the state of local emergency anymore, and we'll be rescinding that in conjunction with the province going forward. That said, that doesn't change the guidelines. The guidelines are still in place. The rules are still the same. The existence of the state of local emergency is just a technicality, and it's just a matter of getting that right.
Does the committee have to meet, or can you do that?
I think that the chief can do it. I think that the chief of emergency management can rescind it on his own. Right now, it doesn't expire for another couple of months, but we'll figure that out. There's this special committee, which is just me and one member of council, and I think that committee, in conjunction with the chief, will make that decision.
I thought you were going week by week.
No, we changed it when they went to 90 days just to cut red tape. So we just made it for 90 days. Otherwise, it would just expire today, as a matter of fact.
What will it mean for city finances to have some of these recreation facilities open? Because obviously you're going to have to step up the sanitation that you didn't do before, but what does this mean?
It's good and it's bad. It's good in terms of we'll get a little more revenue back in the house, but it's bad because those costs will be higher. So even facilities that were operating on a break-even basis still won't. So by and large, it will probably mean a slightly bigger deficit at the end of the year, but doing so while providing services people want and need.
Is there anything that is off the table for the summer? Like, for instance, I don't know if you mentioned it before, I can't remember, the camps, summer camps for kids.
Yeah, it looks like sleepaway camps are pretty much off. Regular schools will not start until September at the earliest. There will be some elements of day camps in place that we've been working on and other providers have been working on. And then they made an interesting statement about team sports today. That was new to me. I'm going to have to analyze that in a bit more detail. I don't know what a 50% in-region sporting cohort means, but it may be possible that some team sports that we thought were completely off the table might be able to come back in a limited capacity this summer.
Do you think Calgary is ready for all of these steps? It's a pretty broad reopening.
Let's be clear. It would be very surprising if we did not have a resurgence in cases after this opening. It's a calculated risk that the province is taking because the healthcare system has so much capacity right now to be able to take COVID patients. So as I've been saying since we first started talking about easing restrictions, and I prefer using the term easing restrictions to reopening or relaunch, because it will be different, the world will be different. You still have to wear a mask, you still have to keep physical distancing. But the calculated risk here is simply saying, look, COVID's still here. There's no treatment, there's no cure, there's no vaccine. Some people will get mildly sick, some people will get very sick, some people will die. But we are able to ease restrictions to help with people's mental health and the economic health of the community because there's room in the ICU for you. But all of that said, you don't want to go to the ICU. Listen, most people who go to the ICU die from COVID. Most people who go to the ICU for COVID die. So you don't want that. And so it really is up to citizens, to individuals, to keep up their good actions, to make sure you're keeping that physical distancing 2 meters or 6 feet or 36 mini donuts apart, to make sure that you are wearing a face covering, even a cloth face covering or one of the masks you can pick up at the drive-thrus now, when you are around with other people, to make sure that you've downloaded the Alberta Trace Together app so that should you get sick, we can contain the outbreaks. Right now, it really is in citizens' hands. You've heard me say this before, but when there's a flood, no one of us can control the water. When there's a pandemic, every one of us can control the spread of the pandemic. So now it's much more about personal risk mitigation and individuals doing the right thing.
Is there going to be issues on capacity for some of these facilities, indoor facilities? Like, for instance, you go to a hockey game, some of these old rinks, and it's just full of parents feet apart from each other.
Yeah, for sure there will be. For sure we're going to need physical distancing restrictions. People are going to have to stay 2 meters apart. And there will likely be, in some cases, some physical renovations, as we've seen in restaurants, about putting up barriers and things.
The Premier said yesterday that there were 500,000 masks for Edmonton and Calgary for the transit systems. Have you heard any details on how much, is that 500,000 per city? Is it
yes,
splitting?
so the city will be shipped 500,000 masks. And this isn't primarily for people for whom the drive-through mechanism, which I think is actually pretty smart for a large percentage of the population, but not everybody has a car, not everybody lives near one of these drive-throughs. And in particular, one of the places we really want to encourage mask wearing is public transit. So we are apparently getting a shipment of 500,000 masks. We may have received some of it already. I have no idea how big that is, and what kind of a room that will fill. But we are working on different plans for how to distribute those, with an emphasis on people for whom the drive-through option doesn't make sense. If the drive-through option makes sense for you, you can start picking those masks up now, and it makes sense to do that.
Do you think that that will be part of using transit, as in you must have a mask to ride?
Yeah, you know, the province has been very hesitant to say the word must, or to actually put mandates in, but the public health instructions are very clear. If you're going to be somewhere where you can't keep consistently 2 meters away from everyone else at all times, then you should be covering your nose and mouth. I've been doing it, and I hope that others will as well. And transit is a great example of that. You're on a bus with a bunch of strangers, people are boarding and getting off, and you can't always stay 2 meters apart. So it makes a ton of sense if you're on the bus or the train to cover your face.
Are you thinking like on-board distribution or other methods? Is that what they're looking at?
Yeah, we're looking at a bunch of things, from distribution at train stations. Onboard distribution is just a bit hard logistically. It's hard to keep everything clean to make that work, but we are certainly looking at a number of options. But again, remember, you don't have to wait for an Alberta government mask. You can use anything to cover your face, even if you're using a Stampede bandana to cover your nose and mouth. That is better than nothing. Not much. We've been following it, and I don't have any ridership from this week. We saw a little bit of an uptick when restaurants and so on reopened, when shopping malls reopened, but as far as I know, we're still sitting at about 85-90% decline.
So no immediate, like this week, early next week, plan to recall any people laid off from transit?
No, not yet.
And finally, on easing restrictions, I know you guys closed down the road, Crescent Road, because people were massing up there. As the province eases restrictions, can we see that road reopening soon, or is it turning into a pet project to keep it shut permanently?
Not so much a pet project, but a project for safety. What we're seeing is, for whatever reason, this COVID has resulted in a ton more people walking and cycling. It's hard to buy a bike now. The bike shops have seen incredible sales, and this is happening all across the world. So we just want to make sure these things stay safe. So for me, when I think about Memorial Drive and so on, And it's up until the point where the traffic becomes such that the congestion is too much. Right now, the pedestrian and cycling congestion is too much. I see this continuing at least through the summer, but again, things will change as they have continuously through this pandemic.
Okay, I just got a question from the newsroom. If you can talk about how the city plans on opening the facilities, given the fact that much of the staff has been laid off.
Well, just that, you know, we're working on plans right now about recalling people about opening up, but it will take some time. It's not something that you can snap your fingers and make happen right away. No one wants to talk about racism? Yes, I think so. So what we've really seen in the last few weeks is something that I liken to the ice in the mountains in the spring. You hear a big crack and the ice breaks and the water starts to flow. And I think that's what we've got right now, is a very different conversation in our community. We've long in our community talked about inclusion and diversity and how we live in a society that is not racist, and I'm very proud of that. But now we're moving to another step. How do we go from not racist to anti-racist? How do we fight racism where we find it, and how do we live by understanding that there are people in our community who just don't have options to live the same life of potential and dignity as others based on the color of their skin? So yes, Black lives matter, Indigenous lives matter. These matter because we need to think hard about how to build great lives for everyone who's here now. And so it's not enough just to listen and learn. Right now, I'm focused on listening and learning. A lot of people have been asking me, are you gonna go to the protests? And let me tell you something. I've been mayor for a while, but I'm also someone who has helped organize, has marched in countless protests, peaceful marches, and so on, and it's killing me not to be out there. But fundamentally, there's two things in my mind. The first is very practical. We're still in a public health pandemic, and we gotta make decisions that are right for our own health, our family's health, and our community's health. I have a 79-year-old mother who lives with me. There's no way I can risk bringing COVID home from a mass gathering. But there's also something deeper than that, which is, it really is time to listen. It's time for other voices to be heard. I don't want the story to be, hey, the mayor showed up at a protest. I don't want to take that oxygen. I want to really spend time hearing the real elements of people's lives, like I did last week when I spent a few hours with students from Western Canada High School, telling me the reality of their lives in Calgary, going to a diverse public school in the downtown in one of the most diverse cities in the world. And so the listening and learning is important, but it's not the work. It's the prerequisite to the work. The work is yet to come. And I know that members of my city council have been thinking hard about what that work looks like. So next week on Monday at city council, I expect we're gonna have a good conversation about the work and about what we need to do to make sure that we're moving on that path towards active anti-racism.
What are some of the possibilities of what can be done?
I think we need to figure out ways to enable different community conversations. There's a petition out there that's asking for a symposium on race. I don't know how you do that in a COVID time, but we need to think about that. We need, as an organization, we're a very large employer, we're the second largest employer in the city, and we need to make sure that in our workplace, we are being actively anti-racist, and of course, we need to engage in a broader conversation about policing and what the future of policing looks like in a diverse place. And I know that Chief Neufeld and the women and men of the Calgary Police Service, who have been on a long journey to figure these questions out, will welcome further discussion in that.